Hi everyone, Mike again with MEG Motors. Today we're going to be looking at this Ryobi line trimmer that I picked up off of Facebook Marketplace. I got it for $10. Don't know anything about it. It was sold as non-running, of course, parts only. We know we have two problems with it. In addition to it not running, the string trimmer head is very, very stiff, almost locked up. So we're going to have to pull this apart, see if we can fix that. And we're going to have to work on the engine, see if we can get it to run. So we're going to do a quick look over on this one, and then we'll get started seeing if we can make it run again. So looking this one over, it doesn't really look that bad. It's complete, which is a good thing. A lot of times the air filter covers are missing, or other parts might be missing, but everything looks good. The throttle moves and works smoothly. I pulled it through. It appears to have compression. Looking down where we see our most common problems, which is fuel lines, of course. There's the fuel lines there, and they are hard as a rock. So very, very stiff. And the primer bulb right here is so stiff I can hardly push it. So we definitely have issues there. I looked inside the tank, and the fuel lines are in there, but they're stiff and hard as well. And the retainer for the cap is broken off and it's laying down inside the tank. So we're gonna have to fish a few parts out of there, and we're definitely gonna have to put fuel lines on it. Not sure what's going on with the trimmer head. Like I said, it's very, very stiff. This is not a bump feed head on here. It's a manual line head, and I don't know what happened. I suspect we've got some bad bearings in here, so we're going to take this housing apart and look at the bearings and maybe see if we can find some replacement bearings to fix this head. Other than that, the guard's in place, and the trimmer for the line is in place, so it'd be nice if we can get this head back together to put on this trimmer and make this a complete unit again. So we're going to do our standard test. So we know we need three things to make this engine run. We need compression, we need spark at the right time, and we need fuel in close to the right ratio. Like I said, I've pulled it through and I believe that we have enough compression. So we're going to run a start on spray test. We're going to pull the air filter cover off. We're going to spray some spray in there and see if we can get it to at least attempt to start on carburetor cleaner. You can do that test with carburetor cleaner or gas or actual starter fluid. I just use carburetor cleaner because I have it handy. So I'm going to reset the camera. We're going to run that test, and it's going to help us figure out what we're going to have to do to make this thing run. Okay, so with the choke open and the throttle open, we're going to pull the throttle wide open. We're going to shoot a short shot of spray in there. The kill switch is momentary, so it's always on. So we're going to pull it through. I'm going to hold the throttle wide open. We're going to pull it through a few times and see if we can get it to do anything. Oh, that was pretty cool. It started on the first pull. All right, so for the start, we know that we have spark. It's sparking at the right time, and we have enough compression to make this run. So we have some fuel problems. We know we need to put lines on it and a primer bulb. So we're going to pull the carburetor off of this one. We're going to go through it, see what we can see in there that might be wrong, and see if we can make this one run again. All right, so we're going to go ahead and pull the carburetor off of this one. Going to clean it up a little bit, open it up, see what's going on inside, and probably do a rebuild on it. We're going to replace the fuel lines as well. So let's get this carburetor off of here. Got two screws here. Got a throttle cable right here. Oh yeah, look at that. Our fuel lines just kind of broke apart when we went to pull the carburetor off. All right, I'm gonna clean this up a little bit, and then we'll come back and open it up and see what's going on inside. All right, so let's get started taking this one apart. This one again, like we've seen on a couple other videos, is a barrel style carburetor, where the throttle opening is controlled by a barrel inside the middle of the carburetor, unlike a butterfly valve, like where we have a flat metal plate to control the throttle opening. This one has a barrel, and it's important with these barrel style carburetors that the quadrant rises up out of the carburetor as you open the throttle. Hopefully you can see that in this video. I've seen cases where, like on this one, it uses a small plastic post to cause the barrel to rise, and that post will be broken off and the barrel won't rise, and if that's the case, then this carburetor won't work. Then it would have to be replaced. But this one seems to be working fine, so we're going to go ahead and pop the cap off here, take a look inside and see what's going on. Alright, so there's our primer bulb, and then we have this block here, which works with the primer bulb to provide some one-way valves that make the primer work. I'll pop that loose. Alright, and that takes us down to, this is our metering chamber inside. So this carburetor has two parts. It has both a fuel pump and a metering chamber. And this diaphragm right here on the metering chamber is where we see most of the problems with these carburetors. So we're going to see if we can pull that metering diaphragm off of there. And what we're looking for is for this diaphragm to be soft and flexible, and this one is very, very hard. So that's definitely a problem. When these, so the way these carburetors work is this chamber will be full of fuel, and as the engine draws the fuel out of this metering chamber, it will pull this diaphragm down into the chamber until it hits this metering lever, and the lever will raise the needle off of the seat, which will allow more fuel to flow into this chamber. And as the fuel flows into this chamber, the diaphragm will be pushed away, and the needle, or the lever, will rise again, and the needle will seat to seal the carburetor off. So when this diaphragm gets rigid like this one is, it will either stick in the down position, which will hold the lever down and the needle up, which will flood the carburetor, or it will get stuck in the up position, in which case no fuel will be allowed into this chamber and the engine won't run. So this chamber is definitely one of the problems with this engine, so we're going to have to put a new one of those on for sure. And then this is the fuel pump side of things. The important parts are this membrane right here, which needs to be soft. This membrane is pulsed back and forth using a signal from the crankcase of a two-cycle engine. So a two-cycle engine, the crankcase alternately has pressure and vacuum, and that will cause this diaphragm to pulse back and forth. And when it does that, it'll work with these two one-way valves right here. These little flaps here work. They work up against this block onto this orifice and this orifice to create a one-way valve that will cause fuel to flow into the engine, or into the carburetor, and make it present. It actually pools right over here in this chamber right here, where this protrusion is right here, which is on the other side of the needle. So the fuel pump pumps to fill up this chamber so that this chamber can supply fuel to the metering side of the carburetor. Alright, so this one actually feels pretty good, this fuel pump diaphragm. The membrane is soft, doesn't appear to be broken, and the one-way valves seem to be free and moving well. So I think we're okay there. Now we're going to go ahead and pull the needle out of the seat and clean it up a little bit. I have to get a different screwdriver. So we're going to take this screw out to take this metering lever out, and you want to hold your thumb over this when you do this, because there is a spring in there and these parts will go flying. Now I'm going to again hold my thumb over this while I take this screw out. And there's our parts. This is the spring I was talking about. I want to be careful that spring doesn't go flying. It's very, very small. It'd be very hard to find if it did. So looking at this one, the the needle here actually doesn't look too bad. It's still at least black on the end. A lot of times it'll be discolored. We're gonna clean it up a little bit, but it looks to be relatively okay. So I like to spray a little carb cleaner in the corner of the rag, and then I'll spin the needle. You can see little spots of dirt that come off of there. So I'll keep doing that until no more dirt comes off of the needle. And then I'll dry it off. And so there's our needle. All right. So this screen right here is like a pre-filter that filters the fuel. There should be a filter in the tank, but this screen also filters out some of the junk in the fuel. So we're going to pull that screen out, make sure everything's clean on the other side. So the fuel comes in through this pipe and comes through this screen. So any dirt that it catches will be on the other side. So we're going to pop that screen out, and I'm going to need my pick to do that. Alright, so this screen is normally pressed into the cavity, and it will be up on the sides of the cavity as well. So we're going to reach here and try to grab it on the side, see if we can walk it out of there. They usually come out pretty easy, but there it is. Oh yeah, so you can see in there, hopefully you can see some of the dirt that's in that cavity in there. So we definitely need to clean that out. One other spot you need to look for on these carburetors, especially the barrel style, is this orifice right here. This is the orifice where the fuel gets pulled into the engine down into the barrel, and there's actually a one-way valve in there. Hopefully you can see in there that there's a rubber disc inside that brass fitting right there. And so when we pump the primer and we pull a vacuum in this chamber to pull fuel in, if we don't have that one-way valve in there, it'll just pull air into the metering chamber instead of fuel, and we won't be able to prime the carburetor. So it's important that that one-way valve is in there. It's pretty obvious if it's not. You'll be able to see right through the fitting and into the opening in the top of the carburetor. But this one looks to be okay, so I think we're in good shape there. And so I'm going to clean this section up a little bit and go gather some parts, and then we'll put this back together. Alright, so we're ready to put this back together. I had the right diaphragm in my spare parts. I buy these in bulk. You can buy these on Amazon or eBay. Just search for like trimmer diaphragm or Zama diaphragm or Walbro. I don't even think we checked to see what model this one was. Yeah, this is a, I don't know if you can see the name there. It's R-U-I-I-N-G, Ruing. This is not one of the more popular ones. I see these from time to time. I'm not sure where these come from. I think these are just Chinese replacement carburetors. I don't know if this is OEM or not. Typically I see a Walbro or a Zama. And so this is a Ruing, but it's okay. It'll work. So I had the right diaphragm. The original diaphragm just fell apart in my hands when I tried to take it apart. So I don't know if you could tell or not, but when I took this off, this was actually two separate pieces. There's a gasket and a diaphragm. When you replace these, you have to make sure that you have both a gasket and a diaphragm when you put it back together. Even though that may look like one part, it's actually two parts. So we're good to go there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put this screen back in. So I've got the screen here in my hand, and I've cleaned the recess where it goes. And so when you're reusing the original screen, a lot of times this will just push right back into place. Not too much trouble. Worst case, I'll take a small 1/4-inch drive socket like this one and use that to push it down into the recess a little bit farther and get it to seat in there. So yeah, so that looks good. So then we'll put our needle in, right in the slot. We'll put the spring in place in the body of the carburetor. put the spring in there like that. And then when we look at this metering arm, you'll see that there's a bump on this one. That's where the spring goes. So I'll hold this in my hand. I'm going to set it on the spring first, and then I'm going to pull it back and work it under the needle. And then you want to look from the side to make sure that the spring is in the right place. Hopefully you can see that. Alright, then we're ready to put our screw back in. Alright, so the start assembly again, we're going to put this part back on over the fuel pump. You can see that goes on this way. When we put the metering diaphragm side on, the gasket goes on first, and then the diaphragm. Then we'll put our primer part on there, and then I've already put a new primer in the cap here, so we're going to just set that right on top. We're going to put our screws back in. Alright, there we are. So let's reset a little bit. We're going to work on putting some new fuel lines on there, and then we'll get this carburetor back on and see if we can make it run. Alright, so we're going to work on putting some new fuel lines on this trimmer. These lines are just falling apart. They're breaking as soon as you touch them. So I was doing a little cleanup work down here. I broke one off, and I'm sure the others are going to break off as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut them off right here, the one that's left, and then I'll push the remaining piece inside the tank. I'm going to do a little cleanup on top. Let's see if we can shake those pieces out. Here comes one. Yeah. Alright, so here's our two fuel lines, and this is the gas cap retainer that fell apart on us already in there. So, yeah. There's our fuel pickup. See if we can get the line off of that. It's interesting on this one that it has this piece in place. Typically that's not on the fuel pickup line. That's typically used on the return line to keep the return line from being pulled out of the tank. So somebody may have worked on this one once already and put that in the wrong place. Alright, let me see if I can get this off. Sometimes when the lines get stuck on there like that, if you slid them down the side and get them to come off. There we go. All right, so I already have the right size fuel line picked out. On this one, it looks like both fuel lines are the same size. The fuel line comes typically in 4 different sizes, and you can buy a set on eBay or Amazon that has all 4 sizes, typically a couple feet of each one. And you just select the right size if you're working on just one, if you're just trying to fix just one. I work on enough of them that I buy this in bulk, and so it's important that I have the inside diameter that fits tight on this fitting. There's 2 different inside diameters. One's fairly larger than this one for bigger fittings, and if you try to use that one on this size fitting, it will leak. And so this is the right size for these fittings, and it's the right size to fit in the tank. And so we're going to use this tool. This is a special tool just for pulling in fuel lines, and we'll thread that in through the hole in the tank, and we'll hook it onto our fuel line, and we'll use that to pull the fuel line in. We'll also use a little bit of lube. This is lubricant for mounting tires. It's called bead lube. So we'll use some of that on the fuel line to help it pull into the tank. And so first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut the fuel line off at an angle. Like that. And we're going to use an awl, and we're going to pre-poke a hole in the fuel line to make it easier to get our tool on. Then we'll thread our tool in through the tank like that, and we'll see if we can get the tool to go on our fuel line. There we go. We'll use a little lube on the fuel line. If you don't have any bead lube, obviously you could use soap or soapy water or something like that. Anything will help, a little oil maybe. All right, and so we're going to push this in. We're going to pull our tool back out, just like that. And we'll pull that fuel line right out of the tank. All right, and then we're going to cut the end of this one off right here. Let's see, on this one. All right, so it's not really critical, but this is the fuel pickup line, so this is where fuel will come out of the tank. So we're going to use this one to be our pickup line. And so to make that work, we're going to have to measure off a little bit of extra line. Cut that off. And we're going to put our pickup, our weighted pickup, on this line. We'll lube the end of that too. Then we'll put this little wire retainer that just helps this stay on. So hopefully you can see that, how that's all put together. Then we'll simply push this back into the tank. Then we can pull this line back until we have the right length in there. So yeah, so that's good. So we need to do another one for the return line. So again, we're going to cut our diagonal, kind of poke a hole in it with the awl. Went a little big on that. We're going to put our tool back in the tank. Put a little lube on the fuel line. We're going to pull this one in as well. Alright. We can cut that off. Alright, so this is where we typically see this piece here. This is just a connector. I'm going to try to get this one off of these fuel lines. Probably going to have to cut at the fuel lines again. So one side of it broke off. This piece is not really critical. If it doesn't go in there, it's not the end of the world, but we'll try to get it in there. All right, so we got that off. So the only thing this is for, because this line barely goes into the tank, this is just a return line, so it doesn't have to go down into the fuel. It's just going to terminate right inside the tank to stop it from being pulled out. What we'll do is we'll cut this fuel line off here. We'll put this piece on the end of the fuel line. And then we can pull this line back until that hits the top of the tank, and that'll help to hold that line in place. All right, so that takes care of our fuel line installation. So we are ready to put the carburetor back on and see if we can make this run. So we are going to hook our throttle up, put our carburetor on the air filter housing, put the screws in place. All right, this is our fuel pickup line. It needs to go on this fitting right here, so we're going to clip that off about the right length. And maybe a little too long. Clip just a little bit more. And this is our return line. It goes on this other fitting back here, so we'll clip that off about there. All right, so we are ready to put some fuel in this and see if we can make it run. All right, let's see if we can get this one to run. We're going to go to full choke. The kill switch is momentary, so it's always on. I'm going to hold full throttle. We'll pump the primer a few more times. Let's see what happens. Alright, so that sounds pretty good. Starts easy and it seems to be running good. So yeah, I think that fixes the running part anyway. We still need to work on the gear head, the gearbox on the shaft there, and see if we can get that to work. But if we can get that fixed, I think we'll have a good trimmer here. So let's go back in and see if we can get that gearbox fixed. Let's take a look at this trimmer head here. Like I said, this one is all but locked up. Can turn in a little bit, but not much. So we're gonna pull it apart and we're gonna split this housing and see what's going on inside. Let's keep taking these screws out and see if we can separate this housing. All right, so kind of as I expected. And I got a lot of old dried up grease in here. And some bearings. Yeah, this bearing here is completely locked up. These bearings still turn. This one's not too bad. They don't turn too smoothly, but they turn okay. The gears actually look okay. So I'm gonna clean this up a little bit, see if I can find a number on these bearings, and we'll see if we can maybe get some replacement bearings and fix this gearbox. All right, so with the trimmer head, the top gear is locked in the vise. We're gonna just put a wrench down here on this hex, and we're gonna screw the gear right off the top. All right, so there's our gear. And there's our bearings. And I'm going to pull out a bearing puller and see if we can pull these bearings off of here. All right, so I've assembled this bearing puller on this shaft, and we're going to try to pull these two bearings off of this shaft. I don't know how hard they're going to come off. Oh, looks like actually they're coming off really easy. The first one's almost fallen off. It looks like we have a spacer. It goes between them. And then we have one more bearing on there. This is the one that's really locked up. Alright, so there's our two bearings. Yeah, look at the rust up in that one. There's our two bearings. I think I can get a number off of this bearing right here. And it says China CCF. We'll see if we can translate that into any kind of a number and buy a replacement bearing, or maybe just measure the bearings and come up with some replacement bearings. Alright, so hopefully we'll be able to get this head back in shape so we can use it on this trimmer. Alright, so it took a little digging to find some bearings, but I found some. I was having trouble because the part number that was on the old bearing was no good. The CFF that was on there is just a manufacturer, a Chinese manufacturer of bearings. And so I was measuring the bearings in millimeters and I couldn't find anything that matched. But when I measured in inches, which is interesting, I found bearings right away. This is a 1/2 inch by 1 1/8 inch outside diameter by 5/16 wide. And so the bearings were I actually got 10 bearings, I think, for $14. They came in a roll of 10 bearings for $14. So You know, just a little over $1 a piece for these. So now we just need to figure out how to get them on these shafts. And first one we're going to do, we have to put one bearing on this shaft right here. And I had hoped that they would just kind of press into place, but it doesn't look like that's going to work. So we're going to use the vise here as a press and see if we can press this bearing on. It started on okay, but then it kind of bound up. Looks like it's going on straight. It's just having a little trouble. Now I'm going to try one more thing. So I've got a socket that's the same size as the inside diameter race, and so I'm going to put that in place and put all this back in the vise. Sometimes when we have one that gets sticky like this, you can hit the vise. There we go. Look at there. Hit the vise and the bearing jumped right on. So there we are. This bearing is installed. I think we're in good shape there. And now we have two bearings and a race that we have to get on this shaft. And I tested this just a minute ago, and this one did kind of press on, so I'm hoping, yeah. So that one slipped right on, which is good. And our spacer goes on, and hopefully this one will slip right on too. Yeah, very good. So there's our two bearings on there. And then I'm going to get a little thread locker. We're going to put some thread locker on here, and we're going to screw this gear back on the end of this shaft. So I'm just using the blue thread locker, which is not the one that you have to heat to remove. I don't know if there was any thread lock on here when I took it apart. It didn't come off that hard, so I'm thinking not, but we'll put a little thread lock on there anyway. And we're going to screw this gear back on this shaft until it bottoms out. I believe that the way this rotates, once the trimmer is running, rotates in the direction to screw this on anyway, so it won't come undone. But we're gonna put it back in the vise and tighten it up. Go the other way. All right, that feels good and tight. So with our new bearings in place, we should be able to, yeah, look at that. It turns nice and free. All right, so with our bearings installed and our gears turning freely, now we're ready to put this head back together. So we're gonna put this in here. We're gonna work a little grease in there. The bearings are sealed, so they don't need any grease. This is just grease for the gears. So we're going to put a little on the gears, and we'll put them in the housing, put them both in the same housing. Like that. Maybe put a little extra grease in there just to keep them lubed up good. We'll put the other side on and put our screws back in. It may seem like a lot of trouble to rebuild this gearbox instead of just either buying a whole nother shaft with a head on it, or or something like that. But from what I've seen, most of the time when people are selling just the attachment, they want more for it than I can typically buy a complete unit for. So I'd expect to pay $20 to $35 for a good attachment for a trimmer. And for the cost of 3 bearings at about less than $1.50 a piece, I was able to fix this one. So that's worth it for me. And other than the trouble finding the bearing, it really wasn't that much trouble to fix. A little trouble to pull the bearings off if you don't have a bearing puller like I had. But all right, so there we go, yeah. That's all back together. We'll put it back on the, whoop, forgot I gotta loosen these or it won't go back on. Not sure if I can get it on with just those 2 loose. Oh yeah. So there we go. This last screw here will go in here and that will stop it from spinning. All right. All right, there we go. There's our trimmer head. So this will go back on the power head that we fixed earlier, and we'll have a good trimmer for somebody. So yeah, so thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed this part. This was actually my first time rebuilding one of these, so it was interesting for me to do that rebuild. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe and check my playlist. There's other videos out there about other small engine repair. And stay in touch and we'll see you on the next repair.